All right, it's just about a minute after 8, and I want to welcome everyone. This is so exciting to see as more and more people come on to participate in this conversation. I'm so thrilled by the interest and really excited to get going in just a minute. So I think a few people are still coming through the waiting room. Okay, I'm going to get started. So welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation tonight. I had the opportunity to hear Pastor Michael J.T. Fisher a couple of weeks ago when he was invited to address the Executive Committee of the Rabbinical Assembly. Some of you know I serve on the Executive Committee of the Rabbinical Assembly, which is the organization of conservative rabbis, and it was not long after the killing of George Floyd, and Pastor Fisher's neighbor, a colleague of ours, Rabbi Stuart Vogel, who has become friends with Pastor Michael and has done some work with him, invited him to speak to us and share, and just I was incredibly inspired. I was electrified by his presentation to this group of rabbis and reached out to him hoping that he would have a little time to speak with our community today. He's actually on the West Coast, and he's so generous with offering us the opportunity to share with us. He is the spiritual leader of the oldest Black church in Compton, California, called the Greater Zion Church Family, where he has also emerged as a leading advocate for social and racial justice. He's an incredible preacher and a wonderful leader of the entire community in Compton. And he follows in the illustrious footsteps of his late beloved father, W. Jerome Fisher, who served as pastor for nearly 50 years. Pastor Michael Fisher's preaching style has been described as real, raw, and relevant. And that's kind of what I felt when I heard him speak to us a few weeks ago, and I think you'll experience some or all of those attributes tonight. So I'm not sure how you prefer to be addressed. Pastor Michael, Pastor Fisher?
Pastor Michael's fine.
Pastor Michael, okay, wonderful. Pastor Michael, we're so happy you're here. Just in terms of the flow of the evening, I'm gonna be in dialogue with Pastor Michael for a little bit, and then we'll open it up to questions and answers and conversation amongst all the people who are with us tonight. For now, if everyone could just keep yourselves on mute so that we don't have background noise like really loud birds or anything like that. And if you think of a question in the course of the conversation and you don't think you'll be able to remember it until the Q&A part, you can just type it into the chat and we'll get to it in a little while. And then of course, you can ask other questions when we get to that time period. But Pastor Michael, I've been following you on social media. As you know, we've been chatting on Instagram Messenger, and I've been reading about you ever since that Rabbinical Assembly meeting. And I noticed that recently you said, it seems like we are in the middle of the book of Revelation. Now, before I ask you to explain what you mean by that, I just want to say that this is not a book that many Jews are familiar with. It's the last book in the Christian Bible. And an alternative translation of that book is the Book of Apocalypse. And I think most people know the term apocalypse. So tell us, in your words, in your experience, why are we in the middle of an apocalypse now?
So first of all, hello to everyone. I bring you greetings from Compton, California, Greater Zion Church Family. Currently, if it looks like I'm a little darker than what I normally am lighting, I am actually, just for you guys, I'm in between filming right now a special that we're doing on Sunday with a huge ministry here in Los Angeles. And so I just want to say hello. And you guys are more than welcome to follow me on social network after this at Michael J.T. Fisher everywhere. I don't even really use Twitter, but Instagram, I'm there. I am on Instagram, Facebook as well. Yeah, so the book of Revelation for us is this forecast, if you will, of kind of when God's judgment begins to hit the earth. He begins to kind of judge the world for their sins. And it's interesting because according to the book of Revelation, it's really about the sin of how it is we've been treating one another. How so much blood being shed. And it's as if there's a moment where it all rises to the top and it must be dealt with. And so for me, when I referred to the book of Revelation, it felt like that moment where God is like bringing it to the top so that it can be judged. I think that a lot of people see judgment as a horrible thing, but actually the word judgment just simply means that it will be weighed, right? That we have to face it, and then we have to decide what we are officially going to do with it. In the book of Revelation, God ultimately weighs it out, and he decides what he's going to do with the evil workers, and he decides what he's going to do with those that have upheld his name and lived by his principles. For me, I feel like right now America a little bit is in that revelatory moment where racism, which has kind of been this rip current that has been, underneath us for a long time. It's kind of been taboo to talk about, but it's as if it's being forced to the top so that we can weigh it out. And as a country, as a people, we're going to have to officially determine what we're going to do with this thing. Are we going to keep it around? Are we going to continue to deny it? Or are we finally going to decide to put it over here, to abolish it, get rid of it? And then how can we move forward in a more constructive, unifying fashion? So that was the reason why I referred to the book of Revelation.
You also recently posted a very powerful, I don't know what you call them, sermonettes or moments of transcendence, very powerful kind of short messages, video messages. Mm-hmm. And you said recently, this is our moment to make change or die in stagnation.
Right.
So I was thinking about that quote, that statement that you made, and was wondering what is unique about this moment compared to all the other chapters, all the other previous moments of struggle for racial justice in this country. Why is this the moment to make change or die in stagnation?
I actually pulled that, and please forgive me if I misquote the story, but I actually pulled that from the story of Esther, where, she kind of wanted to hide. She kind of wanted to keep her identity still a secret, if you will. And her, quote unquote, if you will, uncle or relative comes and says, listen, for a time such as this, where you put in that place. And if you won't do it, God will raise up someone else to get it done. And she finally comes to the determination of what? If I perish, let me perish, right? But I have to, for the sake of the people, move now, or I'm going to miss my moment. And so from there I feel like this is a unique moment, and I'm going to tell you why. Because in times past, 40 years ago, 100 years ago, when we've seen the lynching of Black men, when we saw the burning of Black men, when we saw the killing of our Black brothers and sisters, it was justified. A lot of our white counterparts of old would look in the other direction on purpose, would deny it to be racist, would justify it by saying we were animals, barbaric, we deserved it. But this go around, the whole world is locked in on it. We have people who probably didn't even realize that maybe some of the things they were saying or some of the things that they were doing is actually maybe a little racist. There seems to be this level of self-reflection that's happening, which right now is a perfect time for us to have these kinds of conversations, right? There, people from all over the world, all walks of life, all cultures are being open to having hard conversations that maybe they weren't open to having 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And we as a people, as African Americans, as people of color, that if we don't take this time now to tell our story, our real story, while they're trying to hear from us and not from rap music, they're trying to hear from us and not from the news. They're trying to hear from us, like how I'm here talking to you. If we don't take this advantage to spread the correct narrative about us, our history, what it is we add to the culture, if we don't spread the knowledge of how it is that there seems to be a system in place that oppresses marginalized people, even beyond people that are Black, then I feel like then we're going to forever stay stuck. This is the perfect time for us to make a turn. If we're going to turn, it has to happen now. If we're going to raise up another generation that is colorblind, that respects where everyone comes from, it has to happen now in this particular climate where the heart has been softened in a very unusual way. And so that's what I meant by that phrase.
How do you think that hearts have been softened right now? Why? Where do you see that?
Well, there are some conversations that I'm having with some of my white evangelical friends. And for those who don't know who white evangelicals are, those are the white preachers, such like a Rob Parsley or Paula White, Rick Warren, that they're coming and saying, I saw that. Talk to me. What can I do? What should be my response? Where Trayvon Martin and Philando Castillo and other examples that have happened throughout history, those conversations never came up. And so what I've discovered is, for me, when I am ready to have hard and tough conversations, usually, and in our faith, we call it, the Holy Spirit, there's an unction, there's a conviction, there's something that happens in my heart that makes me want to sit down with my fellow brother and sister that maybe I've been misunderstanding and get clarity. And so I believe that the hearts are softened and that we're starting to have conversations now with people that would have never gave this topic the time of day.
What kinds of counsel are you giving some of those people?
Well, some of the conversations I'm having, one guy was good. His name is Sean Gaby. He's a very upcoming white evangelical in Canada. And he called me and he just said to me, what can I do? And I said to him, for the first time, just listen. Like I don't need you to project your ideal. I don't need you to tell me how many Black friends you had, so it ain't no way you could be racist. I don't want to have that conversation. I just want you for once to sit down and listen to why it is I'm hurting. And and my advice to many of my white counterparts, also brown brothers and sisters, also Jewish brothers and sisters, is that this is a great time for less talking and more listening. Many times, people want to try. It's just like when someone passes away. I don't know about you all, but for me, my father passed away today, a year ago. And it just kept annoying me when people would come and start saying, I know how you feel. I remember when my dad passed away. I'm like, you don't know what are you talking about? You don't know how I feel. You're projecting your relationship with your father and your experience onto my experience. And while it may seem similar, they're two different experiences. What you can do is sit with me, put your hand on my shoulder, maybe cry with me, mourn with me, but don't come in projecting on me your experience as if your experience was my experience. And somehow now we relate. Just be quiet and listen. And a lot of times when this has happened in times past, people want to come in with, comparative stories. Like, oh, I remember one time when I got pulled over by the cops too. And they were just so rude to me. I'm like, and how in the world does that identify with my experience of being yanked out of a car and not even asked for my ID? And I'm immediately put on a hot hood and my face is burning simply because you assume I'm a thug. And so, right through here, it is important and imperative that people just sit and listen to the pain and the plight that is associated with what everyone is seeing on the media.
So you've got the whole group of Jews on the East Coast, and I just want to note that there are a couple generations represented in this conversation here. There's some high school kids here, some college kids, parents and grandparents. I mean, we've got 4 generations represented here, and I'm so gratified to see that. What do you think that Jews need to understand better about the Black community, about the Black experience in America? Jews in particular.
I would say that if anyone should be able to identify with what we're going through or should be able to see it, I personally feel it should be the Jewish community. I mean, the Holocaust, it's a sensitive subject for you all, right? Because of an atrocity. I mean, that thing was designed to wipe all Jews out. And sometimes for me, it surprises me when fellow Jewish brothers and sisters cannot identify with the pain of their Black brothers and sisters when we say things like the slave trade, when we talk about, you know, being killed and being, our life is, you know, disregarded, or how people are disgusted by just our skin color or how we look. I feel like the Jewish community, if anyone could run to our rescue and kind of help us to say, this is how you get your nation back, right? This is how you recover your culture. This is how you preserve your story. This is how you beat a system that was designed to completely annihilate you. It should definitely come from our Jewish brothers and sisters. I think this on all levels, and I love seeing the millennials on here. What's up to my millennials? Woo, woo. Because I think that it is important that you all begin to become vocal in saying that what the Black community is going through, while it may look a little different, we can relate to it. We stand with them. We refuse to allow any system, any power, any government to feel as if their particular culture and society is better than someone else because of where they come from, right? That can happen on Instagram, Facebook. We need those voices because it's like being in school. And let's just say you're not the cool kid and maybe you're being bullied. It's nothing like when someone from the cool table stands up and says, no, they with me. You kind of just get a different way of being treated. And so with the Jewish community, you know, it's an awesome time for you all to rise up as your ancestors did during the Civil Rights Movement and walk with us and stand with us and be vocal about what's happening to us and relating it back, because for some reason, you know, they do honor how you all came through the Holocaust. Those that, of course, that are not anti-Semitic, because you guys have your own struggles still with that, but they honor what you guys, how you all came through the Holocaust. And I feel like if you lended your voice to our struggle, there's some that would never listen to us, but they'll listen to you. That would be my honest commentary on that.
So I want to ask you about a sensitive subject.
Oh, please.
It's something that people have asked me, frankly, and it's part of the impetus to some of these conversations that we're having, including tonight's. The question of whether Jews openly as Jews, as Zionists, as people who also have a commitment to the state of Israel, would be fully welcome in the movement for Black lives, particularly the Black Lives Matter movement. There has been questions about whether the full expression of our identity and commitments is welcome in that space, or do we have to kind of set aside some of that or suppress some of that in order to march with you, so to speak? Where are those lines of tension, and do they matter that much?
That's a great question. I was just talking to some of my fellow Black clergy, and I was telling them that we're currently coming together in some way to rectify this blending that's happening, because people need to understand that the Black Lives Matter movement is separate from the Black Lives Matter cause. So I am an advocate that my Black life matters. It doesn't mean that white lives don't matter. It doesn't mean that Jewish lives don't matter. But what it does mean is that obviously I'm functioning in a country under governmental laws and rules that seem to always allow my life to be snuffed out, and the case is swept under the rug, while other people, they see justice. So for me, the slogan Black Lives Matter is what I push, but the movement I do not agree with. I don't agree with it for several reasons. Number one, they never attend to their own community. And so when Blacks are killing Blacks, they never show up. That's the first thing. And what I say here, I've said publicly, I've talked to some of the leaders of the movement. Number two, they have this issue of, there's some anti-Semitic things that they say that we do not agree with. Now, what many of you all may not know is that after 68, it was an intentional thing to erase out of the civil rights narrative that both Jews and Blacks walk together. So you have a generation that has come up that honestly believes that the civil rights movement was moved forward just by Black people, and that's not the case. If the Jews did not go hand in hand with us, we would have never moved as far as we did with making things happen. As a matter of fact, if it wasn't for our Jewish brothers and sisters, as great as we are in Atlanta, Georgia, that wouldn't have happened. Many people don't even know that it was a rabbi that helped to fund the Black movement in Atlanta. When Atlanta was trying to wipe us out, it was the Jewish culture that funded our businesses and gave us the loans. That narrative strategically, purposefully, has been erased from about 1970 to 1983. So now fast forward, the Black Lives Matter movement comes up, completely ignorant of all of that. So they immediately believe that they did it on their own. And so that is the issue that they have. Yes, you will be received, because while they may be loud, they are not the majority. And so there are a lot of us who are educated and that we know the story and that we love our brothers and sisters that are from the Jewish descent. We love you. I mean, the whole Christian base. I mean, Jesus, whom we follow, was a Jew, and so everything that we stand on comes from the Torah. It comes from your traditions. And yes, you would be received. You would be received. And that if you connect yourself with the right people, i.e., I believe like myself, we serve as that buffer, to be able to put down those that want to raise up and have an issue with these kind of alliances. So yeah, we're with you. They're just the ones with the attention right now. So, but we're doing our best to tame them and to remind them of the true story.
It's interesting, in Jewish education, kids are taught that their ancestors were active members of the civil rights movement, and it's a badge of pride. I think in Jewish education that kids are taught that this is a part of American Jewish history. I wanted to ask you a slightly different question, again, based on some of my I've tried to listen to so much of what you said in the past several days, and you said something that really intrigued me, and that made me think of some of what's going on in the streets today here in Washington and in so many other places. You said that there's a principle of your faith. I think it's from the Christian book of Ephesians. Mm-hmm. Be angry, but sin not.
Proverbs, yes.
And you said, right after that, you quoted the line from Genesis, but sin crouches at the door.
Right.
I totally see and understand and feel the anger on the street. And I was hoping that you could help us understand a little bit more about what you meant by that tension between anger and sin, and what is that struggle that you were alluding to?
Yeah. So sin, as you know, really means to like transgress or to step in front of, right? And so it's important that we are not emotion led, but that we are God led, even when our emotions are high. I'll say that one more time. It's important that we're not emotion led, but be God led, even when our emotions are high. So we're valid in feeling a way. Everyone is valid to feel however they feel. But we're not always valid to react to those feelings. And so that particular scripture of be angry but sin not was me speaking to God's command to us that we can feel, but it's important that we don't, act in a way that displeases him, that goes against the laws that he teaches us, that goes against the integrity and the character that he has poured into us. I can be angry with you, but it doesn't justify me slapping you in the face. I need to find a better way to convey that. And when I said, which is the reference to when God was talking to Cain, when he was kind of like, sin crouches at the door. What he was telling, if you remember that whole story, is that Cain's emotions were getting out of control, right? He kept seeing Abel get the blessing. He wasn't getting the blessing. And Cain's emotions were getting out of control. And God was basically saying, and this is really what my dad would call fisherology. This is my best way of thumbing it down, is that God is like, it's like a father. He wants to grab Cain and shake him and say, listen, get it together. Because if you don't, there are horrible intentions that are waiting to grab hold to you. And we know eventually how that played out. And it's the same principle now, that we're enraged, we're upset, and all of that. But if we don't get it together and shake ourselves and come up with a legitimate plan that's logical and not emotional, then we too, like Cain, will respond in a way that will only exacerbate the situation. And so my prayer has been, God, not only will you temper me, but temper my people. Allow us to keep a clear mind. Allow us to be focused in this season like never before. Allow us to know what alliances we need to make, what partnerships we need to sit at, how to change the laws and policies. Let us be wise with our words. So let the anger fuel us. Don't let it feed us. Don't let it be the thing that pushes us, God, because we're going to do like Cain did. We're going to make irrational decisions, and we'll end up slaying our own brother. And that never works out good. So yeah, that's where I came from with that.
It's such a noble and holy philosophy of resistance. I really was struck by that. I just want to ask you one more question, then we can open it up to dialogue.
Sure.
Trey Johnson wrote a piece in the Washington Post on Sunday, and the title said, when Black people are in pain, white people just join book clubs.
Ooh.
I'll say it again. When Black people are in pain, white people just join book clubs. And I've actually seen a lot of people like posting their lists of, oh, I'm going to read all these books now. I'm going to read all these, these titles about the Black experience. And that's going to be my contribution to this moment. I don't think anyone in this conversation tonight wants to just be in a book club. Give us some specific direction on what we can do. I mean, I know you may not be as familiar with this specific community, but just in terms of helping us to walk the walk, right?
Right.
What can we do specifically?
Well, one of the things, I'm in partnership, like Rabbi Vogel, like you said, we're friends. And one of the things that we do on a small level is we have dialogue, just so that we can all get to know one another and one another's experience. My congregation gets to know the experience of being a Jewish brother or sister. They in turn get to know the experience of being Black in America. And that is always good. Dialogue is more powerful than people think, because it's in dialogue that you learn to tear down stereotypes. So that's one, get to know your fellow Black brothers and sisters. And again, going back to how we opened up, and just listen. Number two, I think it is vital that everyone starts to pay attention to certain laws that are in place or policies that are in place that leave out your fellow brothers and sisters of color, right? And then find out how you can change that. Well, how can you change it? Well, you guys are in DC, it's about writing a letter to your congressman and your assembly member and saying, hey, that new bill that came down, what is that going to do for the marginalized communities? Where do they fit in that? On a different scale, let's say you work at a particular company and you look around and you realize everyone here is white. It would be great if somebody who had influence would go to the HR and to the supervisor or manager and say, hey, let's get some people in here that are Black. Have those tough conversations, because there's some rooms you can step in because of the color of your skin that I'm not allowed in. But imagine if you brought me in that room. Imagine if you brought me in that room without me ever stepping foot in that room. Imagine if from this day forward, you all begin to say to yourself, what are some policies that we can look at that leave out our brothers and sisters? When it talks about education reform, let's make sure that our marginalized communities are included in that. When we talk about like the PPP that came on out, that bailout fund, what people don't know is that many, many, many Black neighborhoods and communities and small businesses never got the funding. Never got the funding. And it literally was because Bank of America or the Chase Banks or Wells Fargo's would not serve them. Those kind of questions, when you find out those statistics, use whatever power or platform you have to bring attention to it and demand change on behalf of people who cannot demand change for themselves. And I think that that's really the simplest way that we can begin to come out of this ditch, come out of this hole, if you will, and be able to live in the land of the free as being free and experience equality just like everybody else.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful and so
I'm looking through, and
really
I want to say this as well. In America or our culture, it seems to be, our culture is really good with being sorry for a moment, but never rectifying the problem. We're good at that. And now that's just a cultural thing. Everyone does it. That ain't a white issue, Black. It's just an American culture thing. We're good with being like, oh man, that was horrible. Turning it into a hashtag, and then we just move on with our lives. My prayer will be, even some people, because listen, everyone doesn't agree. I get it. I understand that there's a narrative that even maybe one or two of you or some of your friends have heard that makes it seem like they're crying wolf, right? But just for 5 seconds, lean in for real and start to do some investigative work. My mama used to say, now if one person lie on you, okay, maybe they lying, right? If one person say you did it and you say, okay, maybe I'll believe you. If 2 or 3 people start saying the same thing, then I have to start looking around. It's one thing. I'll give you an example. It's one thing for everyone to say, well, George Floyd, why are we making a big deal about George Floyd? But it's another thing when you start stacking it up and start saying George Floyd, okay, maybe they picking on the police. Okay, Breonna Taylor, There ain't no racism. Okay, what about Ahmaud Arbery? Let alone just in Los Angeles, just in 5 days, we've had 2 Black men found hanging. One in Victorville, almost brings tears to my eyes. One in Victorville in front of a library. One in Palmdale in front of City Hall. And these are still the same images. This is still happening from 400, 500 years ago. And for 5 seconds, just think about what you would feel like if you saw someone who looked like you being demoralized, hung from trees, forced, out, forced now to raise their children without a father or without a mother. Lean in on that. Don't be so quick to think that we're jumping to conclusions. And I'm going to touch on a subject that you might want to touch on and you don't want to touch on, but I'm going to touch on it.
Please.
We get it. Yeah, we get it. There are folks, listen, we don't want you all to just give us a free pass. We understand that just like with every culture, we have our criminals. They should go to jail. If they break the law, they should go to jail. If they were speeding, they should be pulled over. They should get a ticket. But what we're asking for, though, is that for us to be tried in the same manner of everyone else. We're just saying, don't execute us, as T.D. Jakes said, Bishop T.D. Jakes, one of our profound leaders in the church. Don't execute us before you even ask us a question. So I just want to tell you, this is a good time for us to all lean in and, don't feel sorry for us. We're going to rise up. We're strong, we're resilient. And again, we're looking to and through your history. You all did it. You have a whole nation to go to, and so together we can beat this. We're going to beat it. We're going to come through it. We're going to be better. I'll close with this. The wonderful thing I love about Genesis 1, when it talks about in the beginning, God created the earth and the earth was without form. The original, like y'all don't know. When I'm preaching, I'll say, oh, the original text is, but y'all know the original text. Is that whole without form is like synonymous where we get the word like chaos. So it's kind of like the earth was in chaos. And here's the awesome thing. And from that chaos comes all the beauty we see now. So one thing I know about God is that he seems to be the master of building and creating beautiful things out of chaotic moments. So if we do this right, and we have more of these conversations, right, there will be beauty that comes out of this chaos.
Well, I can only say amen to that, Pastor. I want to open it up for just the last few minutes for people to get into the conversation here.
Sure.
How about you just unmute yourself if you have a question? Otherwise, I'll just read what's in the chats.
I have a quick question.
Great, Michaela. There's a millennial for you, Pastor.
Hey,
Gen Z,
Michaela.
actually. Quick, it's like a two-part question. One's not as relevant. What, I don't know if the right word is, sect, denomination are you?
Oh, yeah, Baptist.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, just curious. And how much of this do you think will change or improve once the administration changes?
Well, you know what? To be honest with you, I think it'll be the same issue. It just won't be as blatant. See, the only thing that this present administration did was give permission for people to hate out loud. And I mean, if there's Trump supporters on here, so.
There was are you still there?
Freeze?
Is he still there?
I think he's frozen.
I think he froze.
He's temporarily frozen, but he'll be back.
Hello, Rabbi?
Yep.
Did you see my question?
In the chat?
Yes.
I
Yes,
do now.
Elizabeth.
Can you, if assuming we get Pastor Michael back, will you ask that in your own words?
Yeah, you said that you asked Pastor Michael if Jews would be, how would they be welcomed or greeted, whatever, into the Black Lives Matter. And by asking that question, the underlying assumption is that Jews are only white. And that is another
I'm
one.
back. I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry.
I don't know what happened. I'm sorry.
Should I continue or should I wait, Rabbi?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, so by asking that question, the assumption is that Jews are white. They are not Black. Well, the assumption is Jews are not Black, therefore they would not be welcome, which goes to the erroneous assumption that Jews are either white, and then why are we complaining about anti-Semitism, but or that if you are a North American Jew, you are white, which is one of the things that has always been one of our issues.
Right. No, that's a great point. Thank you for that.
It's very off-putting because you just said, well, Jews can't do that because we might not be accepted. So what you said was white Jews can't do that. And there's no acknowledgement that there are anything but Ashkenazi Jews in this country.
Well, I think it's also the issue of Zionism, right, and the support for Israel, which has been a wedge issue, as Pastor Michael said, with the newer generations of the Black Lives Matter movement. So that I think is one of the real concerns for some Jews. But I really appreciate your explanation to that, Pastor Michael. And there was a question in the chat.
Well, I want to go back to Michaela.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. Right. You were in the middle of answering. Right.
Yeah. So real quick, Michaela. So yeah, I think that the only way that this is going to change is through legislation and policy. People have always felt, I mean, what you're seeing now, they've always felt it. It's just that you have someone who's inciting it. When you have someone who's tweeting at 3 o'clock in the morning that we're thugs, and using that kind of terminology and saying things like, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, that he's controlling the climate. And so whether anyone is a Trump supporter or not, I think that's just a humanity thing. I think you can support someone. I don't, but I think you can support someone and then know very matter-of-factly when they are wrong. And so I would hope in the next administration that the climate would be more conducive to change, and not this old school 1948 version. Yeah.
There's a question in the chat that's related to that, which is about concerns about voter disenfranchisement, especially of minority communities. What are your thoughts about polling booth closures and other barriers and registration issues and mail-in ballots and all these things that have a certain veneer of disenfranchising certain voters?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, 110%. I mean, that happens. I mean, there's no other way. There's no deep answer I can give other than it happens. And of course, if you've never been in that marginalized condition, you've never seen it happen. But it's not a figment of our imagination. It's not a boogeyman under the bed. This is real, and we've watched it happen. And now with everything being online, we can 110% probably expect that something tricky is coming down the pipe. So with that being said, where I have been encouraging many of my people in my community is get involved in local legislation. Yes, we're definitely going to vote when it comes to the presidential election and things on the federal side, but you can be effective even faster when you get involved in the local legislation, when you talk to your mayor, to your council members, to whoever the school board member is. They're the ones that decide where that grant money is going to go when it finally comes down the pike. When you talk to the governor, so there's more than one way to, eat that apple. I don't know, I don't want to say skin a cat because there's PETA, so there's more than one way. And I'm more vegetarian, so I'll do the apple thing. There's more than one way to eat that apple, and and that is to, while we wait on the federal government to get it together, we can attack it locally. So, hey Diane, you like that, huh, Diane? Diane was like, "That's right. Don't kill the animals."
Rabbi, yeah, while you're right about legislation, and as Tip O'Neill said, all politics is local, it goes beyond that. And I think we're seeing this because a lot of this will happen in the private sector, whether it's companies, whether it's faith-based groups. My wife has had numerous calls. She's an actor. And I can't tell you how many community theaters have called her and say, what can we do? And so it's not just, don't wait for legislation. There's things we can do before the legislation happens, in conjunction with the legislation, and after the legislation happens.
Yeah, I mean, this conversation, that really needs to happen to move us in the direction, it's so layered, and we only have like a few minutes to do it, but you're correct, because another piece of it is economics. That's another piece of it. I mean, the Black community makes up of at least like close to $5 or $6 trillion in spending. And so when it comes to us banding together and choosing to say, I would not support Procter and Gamble until they no longer give money to institutions and bills that enslave or mass incarcerate people of color, then you're right. Some things still won't change, but local level is one way that we can definitely start. Then we can talk about economics. We could talk about other platforms. I agree, because I'll say this to that point, as far as the like Broadway and acting, because I'm coming for them next. And the reason being is because what we see on media is responsible for so much of this narrative. What we hear, in music, is responsible for so much narrative. Just how we're portrayed in Hollywood. I'm currently pushing for a lot of actors that I know, do not take another role that shows you in a light of feeding in that stereotype. I just won't do it. I'll say this. I had a choir. It's called Voices of Destiny. We won in 2010 this National America's, it's called How Sweet the Sound. And we performed in DC. A shame I didn't know y'all then. In DC at the Verizon Center. And we won. And so we were named America's Best Choir. And anyway, we landed an opportunity to be on the game show. I can't remember the name of the game show, but it was with Jeff Foxworth. And the deal was they wanted us to take our hymns that were very close to us, and they wanted us to modernize them. They wanted us to put some rap lyrics on top of it. We're talking about wade in the water, things of that nature. Now, in our culture, we call it shucking and jiving. They wanted us to shuck and jive. They wanted us to perform at the expense of diluting and insulting my ancestors' history. I literally told them no. We left a whole contract on the table that would have gave us thousands of dollars. But for the integrity of my people, I said I refuse to be up there being some, over glamorized Sambo, which is a character from way back in slavery days that depicted us as ignorant with big teeth and big lips and all of that. I refuse to be that. And so I'm challenging many actors and actresses and the industry, like, no longer portray us in that way. Because the truth of the matter is, there's not a lot of white counterparts who have Black friends, right? So the only thing you're going to learn about them is through what you see. So we have to change what people see about us so that then they can change the stereotypes and get to know us in a different level. Sorry, I felt like I rambled, but there you go.
That was great. Thank you. I think we have time for maybe one other question if anyone wants to just unmute and jump on in.
I see in the chat that Jennifer had the same question I did. So I'm just going to say this on behalf of her and myself and whoever else. But I would like to know if there are specific organizations that you think we can help support or actively engage in. I know that it's not a simple answer. I appreciate that it is a multi-layered conversation with many different issues. I am doing what I can locally, and I am in my business, I'm doing what I can, but I feel like it's still not enough. I still can't believe that we're still dealing with so many of these root cause issues, and I don't want to just Band-Aid. I really want to get to the root. So are there specific things that you think we can do or I can do that would have a big impact?
Yes. In our Bible, Paul says to one of his upcoming students, he says, do not despise the little things, right? And so when you look at the Great Pyramids in Egypt, they're really nothing but a glorified sandcastle. It's broken down to itty bitty grains of sand stacked on top of each other. What do I mean by that? I took that long route to say this. Don't underestimate the local or the small things that you do. It's all about changing one life at a time, saving one child at a time, changing one narrative at a time. And so what I'm encouraging a lot of the synagogues in Los Angeles is a couple of things. Find local Black organizations, local Black churches that are doing the work. You have to do your investigation right through here. There are people who want to take advantage of this moment. So you have to find, get in relationship with the leaders of those organizations and see the work that they're doing for the community. Pour into that. Offer your resources, your platform, your finances. Another thing would be maybe adopt a school that's in the inner city, right? You can always adopt a school, go through the school board, and maybe offer funding for after school programming, or bring in people who can actually volunteer their time. Those are ways. Another way, we partnered with a synagogue in Calabasas that is actually going to help. They get pallets of food, but they always have like 25 or 30 pallets of food left over. So they was like, hey, Pastor Fisher, yeah, you're in Compton, right? I'm like, yes, which is a food desert, right? We don't have the fresh vegetables and all of that. So they're sending it to us starting next week. And so now I literally can do a farmer's market. You have no idea how excited I am to do a farmer's market in Compton every other week. So those things right there are things that you can look to do as a complete synagogue. All of you all, you can say, hey, what church is in that community that's struggling? I have some churches I can refer you to that are pastors of integrity, that are working hard in being the beacon light in their community. Yeah, that's one way you can do it. But I would be wary of the large organizations, because I'm telling you right now, a lot of those large organizations that say that they come in our name, a lot of us who are really, in my culture, we say who are really about that life. A lot of us who like really are in the trenches, we don't necessarily agree with a lot of the public figures that are speaking on our behalf. So that's why it's important that you get in on the local level. And that's always better anyway. You never just want to be a charitable group. You just never want to just throw stuff at people. You want to get in there with them. Go down there and meet the kids, in the congregation. So I have synagogues that come and hang out with us, and they just love the culture. And then we come and hang out with them. And we bring our choir and we liven it up. And then they come on down and then they sing certain songs and teach us stuff in Hebrew. That's where it builds.
I think these are These are amazing suggestions, and you've given us so much to think about tonight. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate the time that you've spent with us. I really talked you up around here, and I know that you didn't.
Oh man, I hope I didn't let you down.
No, you didn't let
I have a
anyone
question.
down. People have been messaging me privately. He's awesome. He's amazing. He's great. So I of course knew that already, and that's why I wanted to introduce you to these wonderful people in our community. And thank you for teaching us and for inspiring us, for giving us direction and helping us to figure out how we can be allies.
And I want to jump in and say this, and then I'm done. We are fully aware it's us today, and unfortunately, it may still be you all tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Anti-Semitism is still real. We're still, and so we too. I can only speak for my coalition of pastors and my group, that we stand with you as well. Oh, we know the narrative as well. And yeah, I think it's Yvonne. She's correct. There's some things we're going to have to iron out, about the Ethiopians tribe and the tribes in Africa and all that. We'll get there, right? But while we're on our way there, we know the narrative of how they're trying to pit you all as doing wrong to Palestinians, and how they try to put you in a bad light on college campuses and things of that nature. We know it. We're there, and we're going to stand with you as well. We come against all forms of hatred, period, point blank, period. And when they bombed the synagogue, I think it was in Pittsburgh, I called all of my rabbis I knew, prayed with them, stood with them, and asked the same question: what can we do? So this is a two-way street. That's why I want to end it that way. You listened to me today. There'll come a day where I need to listen to you. And so just like the friends of Job, we'll sit together in sackcloth and ashes until God restores.
Well, hopefully God will also turn our sackcloth and ashes into robes of joy, as the psalmist says, right?
Yes.
And we'll dance and sing and celebrate together as well.
We
Listen,
will.
One thing that I know about my Baptist friends is that, Jews are good at scripted prayers, and there's no one like a Baptist when it comes to an extemporaneous prayer. And as we conclude together tonight, would you offer us a prayer as we end this meeting and end this conversation, not for good, but just for now?
Yes, I'd be honored to. Okay. God, oh God, our Father, our provider, even in this, you take so good care of your children. And for that, I say thank you. I want to personally thank you for this opportunity to coming into the knowledge of a brand new family all the way in DC. I have people I can hang out with when we finally open up and I fly over there. And I ask now, God, that you would bring healing to our land, and that, God, that you would show us how we can dwell together in unity, for there you command the blessing. So God, for what has happened on this call, will you command the blessing upon every household, on every child, on every father, on every mother? Command a blessing on them. Let us be in good health and strength. And God, may we be the better for this. And we'll tell our children and our children's children on how you led us out of this particular wilderness and brought us into the promised land, God, that you showed our prophet as well, Dr. Martin Luther King. And so, God, let us be the generation that fulfills it. And I ask it now. Amen.
Amen.